everyone. Hello. Welcome to Kumbukeni. Thank you all for joining us today. Karibu. That is welcome in Kiswahili. My name is Nduku. I am one of the co-hosts with Kumbukeni. This is our launch show. We are excited to be here. We are excited to be here to talk about Africa. Yes, I see Brother Alimadi getting excited there. Yes, Kumbukeni is a podcast, an African-run source of information whose mission is to tell the African story from an African perspective, helping us all to decolonize our minds. We will speak on and analyze contemporary Africa and African events using the lens of historical Africa. We ask that you all join us as we join other African information providers to clear the path to our liberation and the liberation of Africa and all Africans globally. Today, we have a guest with us. We will sit in conversation with 2nacheki's Michael Omare, otherwise known as Mikey Mushi, one such African information provider to speak on different events currently occurring in Africa. Welcome, Michael Omare. You can support Kumbukeni by joining us as a Patreon at patreon.com/Kumbukeni or subscribing to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@Kumbukeni1. Just in case you do not know the spelling of Kumbukeni, it is running on our banner, so you can see that there. Welcome again. I'm going to hand it over to my co-hosts to introduce themselves and our guest, Michael Omare. Thank you.
My name is Adesoji Ginla, and I'm one of the co-hosts of Kumbukeni. And again, this is a mission to help decolonize minds that have been indoctrinated over centuries of colonial education, which we must admit has not really served Africa any goodwill. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to my co-host, Milton Alimadi.
Thank you, comrade. Thank you, Brother Desoji, Sister Nduku, and our guest, Omare. My name is Milton Alimadi. I'm so excited to be a part of Kumbukeni. I tell my friends all the time, we cannot find African solutions to our challenges unless we, first of all, think African. And how do I mean by that? A lot of what we are taught is very Eurocentric. It's a Eurocentric vision of the world, a Eurocentric knowledge of the world. And that is why we are intentionally grounding our conversations on our history. Many of us, unfortunately, don't know our history, and we don't blame anybody for that because we did not set up our educational systems in our African countries. We inherited them from the colonial era. And sadly, in many African countries, they did not change. So we are producing European Africans, unfortunately. And then we are confused when we can never find solutions to some of our problems. You know, think about it. Most African countries have been independent for 60 years now. How is it that the other continents are going ahead of us when everybody benefits from Africa's resources to develop? We are the ones who don't benefit from our own resources. And we believe that in order for us to start developing, we first of all have to believe in ourselves. And we cannot believe in ourselves unless we are grounded in our history. The knowledge that has been shared by great Africans like Cheikh Anta Diop, one of the greatest scientists in the world. Why is it that everybody knows an Einstein, but we don't know Anta Diop, the author of The African Origins of Civilization? And if you're hearing this for the first time, that's a strong hint. You should order that book. Why don't we know about the solutions offered by Walter Rodney, by Samir Amin, by the late Julius Nyerere, by Thomas Sankara, by Patrice Lumumba? So we want to encourage our people to know that we have always had the solutions, but we're always looking elsewhere. Let's go back to our solutions, the knowledge of Africa. And that's where Kumbukeni comes into play. So I'm very excited for the conversations, the many, many conversations we are starting today. Welcome, all of you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Brother Alimadi. Brother Omare, could you go ahead and introduce yourself? Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be like the first guest
Yes.
like in this groundbreaking show. And most of you on the 2nacheki's side know me, but for the new members, Michael Omare, known as Makimushi, and I'm the founder of 2nacheki, one of Africa's largest YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers, over more than a quarter of a billion views. And our job is to share African perspective, African information, African news from an African, right? So that's our simple, focused goal, and we've achieved it. And we always love when other organizations are doing the same thing and collaborating, right? Because if we do it together, we have a bigger voice and we achieve our goal faster than if Kumbukeni does it alone, 2nacheki does it alone, another group does it alone. If we all come together, shout with one voice, I think we will be louder and we will all achieve our goal of having a one African voice or a united African voice. Thank you, and I'm sure we'll get to talk about this in details as the conversation progresses.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Michael Omare. Thank you, everyone. I'm looking at the chat. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Jeanette. Welcome, Karibuni. That is welcome in Kiswahili. And we are going to start our conversation for today. Omari, Kumbukeni's
Yes.
mission is to decolonize our African minds by
Yes.
providing information. So how can we talk about African independence when Africans have Eurocentric mindsets and views? When you're, I know you're currently located in Kenya. What are you noticing? Is this true? Do we have Africans Eurocentric mindsets and views?
Yeah, but like even let me get back, because you said when we gain independence, there are three types of independence, right? The only thing we got was political independence, right? So there's political independence, there's economic independence, and there's cultural independence, right?
Exactly.
So the only thing the colonialists gave us and gave in was the political independence, right? And that's like, I think, the worst type of the independence. I think rather they would have given us the cultural and the economic, and they would have stayed with the political, because the political brings more problems than solutions, right?
Exactly.
So we never achieved or gotten our cultural independence, because right now we are communicating in English. It's not our mother tongue. We all know our mother tongues, right? Yeah, but because of colonialization, we are speaking in a colonial language, right?
Yes.
Economic independence, we don't even have it. That's why I'm a big supporter of Julius Malema and his party movement, the Economic Freedom Fighters, because at the core, he believes that we are still fighting for economic freedom, because Africa was never given economic freedom, right? But today, we are mostly talking about the cultural independence that we never got. So cultural independence is something that we have to fight for, and it's not an easy fight. You can't take a gun, or you can't do a coup. It's something that's more personal, where you try to persuade the person who doesn't even know. First of all, they are actually still colonized, right? It's too like we have two problems. First of all, to convince the actual people they're still colonized, like everything they do, everything they watch, everything they wear, everything they eat is just like Eurocentric, European, or like for me, I usually like to call it Western, right? Like it's Western influence, right? The media, the food, the clothing, the entertainment, the music, like all of it is like Western. So the first problem is trying to convince somebody they're still oppressed now, and the second problem is after that. Okay, now once everybody know, like, okay, I've seen there's a problem. I'm still colonized mentally, culturally. How do I fix this problem, right? And now I think even now that's a harder solution, but I think when you have a big problem, the best way to solve it is you start with what you have. You just don't talk about the problem. And for us, we started with what we had. YouTube is a free platform. You don't need like uh, like any money to start the endeavor, because majority of everybody watching us already has a smartphone, right?
Yes.
All you need is a smartphone and a voice. 1 billion Africans have a smartphone, 1 billion Africans have a voice. So that's the first step. So if I always say, if 1 billion Africans will do what Kumbukeni or 2nacheki's are doing, I think that will be the best weapon, the first weapon in actually trying to uncolonize us. And a good example of things that have already worked is things like Afrobeat, right? These days, Afrobeat, people talk about Afrobeat like how they do R&B, how they do blues, how they do jazz, how they do,
Yeah,
it's
Burner
become
Boy
part
is a hot
of,
topic now.
yes, like it's become part of the culture. So now Afrobeat music is just one part of Africa, like one bit. So next time it should be our clothing. Next time it's our language. I'm
As you can see.
part of a group called Swahili for Africa, where it's this organization based in Addis Ababa, where we want Africa to be. We want Swahili to be an African language, right? It's been
Exactly.
accepted by the African Union. They are pushing for Swahili to be an official United Nations language, right? United Nations currently has 5 languages: English, Russian, French,
Chinese.
Chinese, and Spanish, right? You know, like all the colonizers, right? So we are really pushing for also Swahili to have an official language, and those are the little fights that we have to do to start getting our culture back. So a kid in South Africa can learn Swahili, which is possible today, right? Like things like this start slowly. So other countries that are not from East Africa that have started teaching Swahili because of efforts, like what we do is Botswana, Namibia, South Africa. They even talks of Nigeria also wanting to put Swahili in their curriculum, right? Like as an elected language, and also talks of Ethiopia also wanting to put Swahili like as a language. Yeah. So
This
small
is a good
efforts like
start.
that is how we are fighting back, right? Because people always say like most of us we like just talking about all the problems Africa have, or but as we come with we identify the problems and we come up with actual solutions where you don't need $1 billion funding to do it, where you can just you yourself try to fix the problem. Yeah.
So grassroots movement, right? We
Yes.
we
Yes.
learn as individuals. I see a bunch of people in the chat, in the audience. You learn and then you teach the next person. So because information is useless if you keep it to yourself. I'll hand it over to Brother Ali Madi.
Wow, I loved the lessons that the brother already dished out. Just a couple of minutes. There's so much information that can benefit people out there. Uh, Maybe the brother can elaborate, though. I like how he broke down the types of independence: political, economic, and cultural.
Sure.
And so I have my concern whether we actually ever even
Polit-
achieve political independence,
Political independence. Yes.
or whether they just said, okay, now let's select a few.
This is
there's a
true.
We
there's a
want
It's
to
flag.
true.
take over the suits. These suits that the Europeans are wearing, it's all
This is
US
true.
now. So maybe you
Yes.
can touch on that a little bit. But I also wanted, because you talk about decolonizing the mind. So listeners, I would like to recommend 2 books: Decolonizing the Mind by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who's of course Kenyan born, one of the greatest writers, literature in the world. And also the late Okot Bitek, Africa's Cultural Revolution.
Revolution.
That one may be a bit harder to get. You can't
First-
order it. If you can get it from some library, please make copies and share it with as many people as possible. Before the brother responds, I just wanted to point out how deep-seated this whole cultural thing is. I was watching this video of a Zambian cab driver. He was driving and he was complaining that, oh, China is taking over now. Look, even the signs are now written in Chinese. And he was pointing at the billboards. And before, it was not in Chinese, and he was pointing at an English English signboard. And I was saying to myself, it's so deep that the brother's not even realizing he's complaining in English. But go ahead, the floor is yours.
Like I think you asked about why I'm saying at least we have political
Independence.
like independence, right? Yeah,
Whether we really
like,
have one.
yeah. Like it's muddled. Most like organizations still are influenced by the West. Like I think even majority, right? But the reason I say political is that it's just that if we get the right types of leaders,
Correct.
they can actually like make it work, like salvage it, right?
I agree.
It's not, yeah, like it's not completely. Like it's not completely like a lost cause. Like a good example, if like there's some really good leaders who've tried their best to improve like their countries. Like a good example is recently there's this video we wanted to post of this minister in Benin Parliament because he was crying, right? So the reason he was crying is because the speaker had just announced that Benin is Africa's largest cotton producer, right? And before he took his post, he was the Minister of Agriculture. Benin didn't, I think it wasn't even a formal sector, right? So I like wins like that, that if you just get the right type of leader, you can be from zero to like the top, right? So for me, political, like I can never give excuses for anybody in like in politics for why they're not performing. It's just that we just need good pragmatic leaders. So like another good example is yesterday we posted a video for the late president of Ghana, Jerry Rawlings, right? And the title was even like I think I was even foreshadowing this conversation. The title was, in the video he was saying how African wisdom is way better, miles like more knowledgeable than Western propaganda, right? So like in the video, he's just saying that even if you go to the village and talk to an old man in our African language, he's more knowledgeable than anything you can find in the mainstream like Western education, right? So he just said all you have to do is go and find the right type of education and just not take what's easily available and given to you.
No, it's true. I agree with you. The political aspect opens the opportunities. It's what we do with it. And anyone listening, if you're on the continent, the challenge is to make them do the right thing.
I would just like to add to what the brother just said. My grandmother used to say one thing, that there's a difference between in her words, Teten book and common sense. That the average African has common sense that they apply. Sometimes you have to set those books aside. So when you come into her presence, leave your book at the door and come and talk to me as an African.
I love her.
We all love grandma.
Like another quick example, like you see in the West there are these flat earthers, and in the Middle Ages people in Europe believed that the world was flat, right? But as you said, like Africans have common sense. No African ever woke up and thought to live in a flat world.
Listen,
because we understood the world that we lived in, right?
And we're supposed to be the primitive people.
Like if you go back in Timbuktu, in the libraries in Timbuktu, in Alexandria, and this is like even long ago than even 2000 ADs, not the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages is like in the 15th century, 16th century, like older than 2000 years ago. Africans knew the world, the physical world we live in, like how the moon rotates around us, how we rotate around the sun. As in, it was common sense to us, right? You don't need books to learn things that are common sense. So I definitely agree with your grandmother.
Yeah, that speaks to the African culture, where Africans are one with nature, right? We understand our earth. We can see when the earth is suffering. We know when to heal it. We understand the sun. A lot of us back in the day, Africans, even when I was a child, my father would stand on the edge of the yard and tell us it's going to rain in a few minutes, and be like, why do you think it's going to rain? And the sun is out. But he knew how to look at the birds and what was going on in the atmosphere. So
Yes.
yes, Africans are one with nature. That is very much
And
true about
to
African culture.
and to also add to the cultural element of it, there's a guy that is often lauded in the West. His name is Karl Marx. But funny enough, his theory, verbatim, was actually taken from a Tunisian brother named Ibn Khaldun. So the idea of Marxism is actually, if you read that guy's book, the name escapes me now. I would put it in the chat going forward. It's funny how we're studied, and then our ideas are presented as their own.
Yes. One more thing they have taken from Africa.
No, but even what about the art? I mean, why is it that
Let's not even go there.
that's what became this famous, But at least, he was ready to admit that this whole Cubism thing was passed on African art and African origin. But not a lot of people know that. Not many people know that and appreciate that. And then how can it be that these are primitive people that cannot produce great works of art?
Exactly.
Then it turns out that the best works of art that you find in the biggest museums in the world are all from the continent. And now there's a big global conversation about returning all these artwork.
And there's also a funny saying, which is the only reason why the pyramids still exist in Egypt is they've not walked their way around to getting it to Europe.
Yes.
Well, the other way, I ask my students at John Jay, I say, well, if Africans did not produce the pyramids, and if Europeans actually did, why didn't they reproduce some in Europe first before they came to produce it in Africa? And then you see their eyes suddenly light up.
Yeah. So it's
He
has posed his own thoughts to our guests yet. So
yes, I'm actually coming home to the work you're doing in terms of media. Brother Alimadi recommended a book earlier, Decolonizing the Mind by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. In the introduction to the book, he says Africa cannot be, I'm paraphrasing now, he says Africa cannot be truly free except the fundamental structures of their existence is framed in such a way that it speaks to their interests and champions their interests at every junction. Everybody knows that the media is considered the fifth estate of government. Now, in your interaction with people, how have you seen that play out in terms of how are they willing to open up to you when you ask them probing questions? And when you also throw ideas to them, how receptive are they of those ideas?
So the question is for me or Milton?
Yeah, I think it's for you, brother.
It's for you, brother.
Okay. Just repeat again. I saw it was a bit cut.
Okay. So Ngugi wa Thiong'o in his book, I'm paraphrasing now, says the idea of cultural independence is based on certain fundamentals, and those fundamentals must work towards the achievement of the African goals, the African ideals. Now, I'm saying the media being one arm considered the fourth estate. How is it that in your line of work, have you encountered pushbacks? If not, how are they more receptive to the idea of things cannot be done as it used to be done, in the sense of passing information across?
Okay, so first, even with Ngugi wa Thiong'o, so like I always like him because he does what he preaches, right? So recently he won some prestigious book award, and he accepted it in Kikuyu, right? I'm sure nobody there even understood what he was saying, but like he was like, why should we have to speak your language? And we also have ours, right? You know, so small things like that really matter. So if can you imagine every athlete in in the Olympics spoke the language, then have these media organizations would have to adapt and have a Swahili translator, have a Hausa translator, have a you get, because right now in those press conferences, in those things where media is involved, I'm sure they've got a French translator, right? They've got a Spanish translator, like Russian, Chinese, right? But there's never an African translator, because Africans mostly give in, right? So going to the media, the media was like solidly had this thing in the bag, right? It was controlling the narrative before, because communications was like communication always evolves, right? So before, communication was one to many, right? Where like one person would dictate the many, where a king would write a decree, right? Back then, this is what is needed of you, or this is what we are like. This is the harvest, right? One source of information was going to many, right? Then because of televised, right? So it was many to many, right? Where like the CNNs, the BBC, Al Jazeera's, France 24 would reach many people like all at once, right? But now with the age of social media, it's now one to many, where like as the king, now everybody has that power of a king, where that power for one person reaching to like a whole country or a whole kingdom, everybody has that, right? So if everybody recognizes the power that they have these days, like I think some social media influencers are more relevant than even world leaders.
Yes.
Yeah, somebody like a good example. Think like Ronaldo. If Ronaldo has a message like of peace or what, like it's more relevant for him to share it than a president of a country like Uzbekistan, or right? Like who has the reach? So if Africans recognize the media is changing and that things are not as before, because before, if for us to do what we are doing, what Kumbukeni is doing, what 2nacheki's is doing, you'd have to have millions, if not billions of dollars, right? Think about how much money the BBC uses like a year. Like I think it's usually 1 billion, if I'm not wrong, right? The BBC, like it's I think it's funded by the taxpayers, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's funded by the taxpayers. So can you imagine if everybody, before you could share your message, you'd have to have 1 billion, right? That was back then in the 60s and 70s, and we had no power to fight back. If the BBCs and the CNNs, they say Africans are just starving people, poor people, they're uneducated people, that was final, because there was no way of fighting back, like physically, there was no way of fighting back, right? Yeah, because they were editing, controlling the message, controlling the narrative, controlling the how people see Africa. But now with evolving technology, right? Because technology always throws a wrench to everybody's plans. Good example is things like metal, gunpowder, nuclear weapons. You think things are going a certain way, something new comes up and it just messes everything.
Takes over.
So now new media, social media, new media has taken over, and us, people like Kumbukeni and 2nacheki's, we are more adapted to it. But now the CNNs and BBCs are now struggling, adapting, trying to pivot, trying to see how we can catch up with this new kind of media, right? And most of them are closing. So many are closing. If you don't know, like a lot of journalists, especially like in Kenya recently, like one of the largest media organization, right? And let me tell you a funny story. Like one of the largest media organization has not paid its employees, I think, since November, right?
Oh Lord.
Yeah. It did a major another one, right? Another one did a major layoff, right? And then recently, my mom called me. Then she was telling me that she read in the newspaper, like it's called Nation newspaper. I think Nation newspaper was founded in 1914, right? It was among the first newspaper in in Kenya, right? Sorry, like even in Africa. So she was telling me that she read that they were celebrating they had reached 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Then she was confused. She was like, "But you told me you had 1 million subscribers on your channel." So she was like, why would these guys with so much money, so much funding, so much like thousands of employees achieve what you and your small team of 3-4 people did in 6 years? Then they've been there for more than 100 years, right?
Exactly.
So that's what I'm saying. Us, we are more adapted to this new media, this new form of communications, right? Because we never had the privilege of, it's so easy if a journalist wants to reach another like a million people, it's as simple as him going to the editor approving the article. It was no effort on us, it was no effort on them, right? Because they had the platform. So now think about it, the power those journalists has, now it's been given to everybody. So now they're competing on a equal basis, which is very hard. Like it's easy for us because we've grown up with this, and it's hard for them because they're finding it hard to adapt to what we have. So that's how I think we have a chance with media, because before, like definitely it was extremely hard, and you'd really have to have so much money or just money. But now these days media can be fought back, and as I've said, before we started 2nacheki's, there was no DW Africa, there was no BBC Africa, right? There was no like there's so many after like I think 3 years of us doing 2nacheki's, that's when these things started popping up.
They
BBC
follow
Africa,
suit.
like DW Africa, right? So now they're trying to
come on to
imitate.
YouTube.
Pace with you.
But
Just want to stay up pace with you.
but I think the train has already
I've
set
already
course.
left the station.
It has.
Because as much as they are the BBC Africa right now, they have a YouTube channel. They are like I think there are thousands of 2nacheki's, there are thousands of Kumbukenis. There's so many African YouTube channels doing what we do. Like even if something happens, like a good example was there was this racist event in South Africa where there's this awards only pool, right? Yeah. So that thing happened while we were still on. I think we were on Christmas break, so we couldn't cover it, right? But when we came back, the amount of African channels that had covered that topic, I was like, we are no longer needed. As if it didn't exist, our goal of Africans telling that story from an African perspective would have been achieved. So for me, that's what I'm even more happy about, that everybody is now knowing they can do what we're doing.
Yes.
Right. So, but Omare, for listeners, viewers who are not familiar with that incident in South Africa, if you don't mind, just briefly remind me.
Okay. Yeah. So if so the story was there was this resort in South Africa, a place called in Bloemfontein, Free State. I think it's in the province Free State, somewhere in the center, Bloemfontein. There's this resort where people are doing their Christmas holidays. Then there's this. The resort had a whites-only swimming pool, right? Then this small South African kids, I think 13, 14-year-olds.
We're talking about this year, right?
2022.
Last year, I mean, the year that just ended.
2022, like in December.
Just for our audience to know that we're not talking about
last century.
No, they're on Christmas holiday. The same way as we were on Christmas holiday doing our thing in resorts or hotels, just traveling. They're doing the same. So the kids were like, "Hey, this is our country. Why can't we swim in a pool? We've paid the same amount of money to enter the resort." So when the kids are trying to swim, first of all, the thing is, all the white people came out of the pool. Like it was 1960s America, right? Like how they used to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, in the 1950s, right?
Then second out, the big men, right? The grown men,
beating up kids
in their 50s, came in. One choked the boy, started beating the boy, took the boy down in the pool, wanted to drown him. Right? So that's what happened. Yeah, but the good thing is that the next day, the EFF party came with like more than 100 people and like just used the pool the whole
Pool,
day.
yeah. That
Nobody
was a
used that
beautiful.
pool. Yeah, so the two men were arraigned and charged with attempted murder, right? So things like this are only visible because of us. If like, because in South Africa, racist events like this happen every day, but through media showing the world, that's when now the government feels like, oh yeah, like even the president made a statement. South African presidents never made the statements because they know the people who put them in power are the minority.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it goes back to what you were saying about the leaders.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. So he's even forced to make a statement about a racist event because South Africa is chock full of them, things like that, right? Even we're even doing another documentary of a whites only town in South Africa, So things like that need to end. So yeah.
Yes.
So
And
that's
by
what
the way, the
now I
president,
think.
Ramaphosa is too busy stitching $4 million into his sofa. He doesn't have time.
Yes.
Definitely. And think about the people they put in power: the Ramaphosa, the Zumas. Like those are people who, for a certain amount of money, they can just do what you want.
Yeah.
Those are not the
Corporate
type of leaders.
politicians.
Yeah.
And
Those are not the type
and
of
our
leaders that we envision.
Yeah, our call of action to those leaders is to wake up and stop putting yourself before your people. As you spoke, brother Omari, I was thinking about a book that I started reading recently. It's a book that is hard to come by, one that's written by our very own brother Ali Mahdi. It speaks about Western media misinformation. It's called Manufactured Hate. And again, it's written by Milton Ali Mahdi. I just put it in the chat for everyone. So, Brother Adesoji, I hear as Omari is speaking about what we are doing and speaking about Africa from a positive perspective and having African broadcasting and representing Africa. There's a new trend in Nigeria, right? As far as media and how it...
Yep. Effective October 1st, 2022, Nigeria banned the use of foreign adverts and voiceover talent. So that means that avenue opens up to Nigerians. Before, you just bring in adverts and you just play it over the TV, wherein there are lots of actors, guys who came out of university, who did theater arts and what have you, marketing, and all sorts. But robbed of that channel to make money, to earn a decent living and what have you. So that's a very positive thing. But then here is the other thing, which is where Brother Omari will actually come in, is I am not sure if you've noticed the trend of newscasters on the continent speaking nasally, wanting to imitate the Europeans. So
Yeah.
it is annoying to say the least.
Listen.
Like
And
even let me tell you something more worrying.
That
right?
always irritated me as I was growing up. Always.
But let me
Go
tell
on,
you
Omari.
something more worrying, because now there's something we've also started noticing, right? Kenyan, the small kids, they're starting to have this British accent, right? And it's the weirdest thing. Like you can find a small kid and they're speaking in a British accent. Then we always wonder, and guess the result. Like it will surprise you. It's simple. Peppa Pig. So many African kids are watching Peppa Pig, right? Growing up, they start talking like Peppa Pig. So small cultural invasions like that go a long way.
We need more African cartoons, right?
Yeah, definitely, and more African children book, and I'll even mention another endeavor we did last year to also fight that, right? Because think about it, out of the top of your head, how many children's books do you know? Cinderella, Peter Pan, they're very few African books until when you become big, you grow up, then you start looking for there's also African stories. Now you make an effort, but for availability, you go to any library, you'd find the Three Bears, Goldilocks, and the
Winnie the Pooh. And Winnie the Pooh.
Yes, the Little Prince. You know.
We have some interesting commentary by the audience in the comments. Yes, we agree with you as far as Peppa Pig goes. So at 1 o'clock, we're going to segue to questions from the audience. If you want to put them in the chat, let me know if you want to join us up here in conversation. I will send you the link. But let's speak about this recent U.S. African Leaders Summit, right, brothers? Brother Ali Mahdi,
It was a success, wasn't it?
wonderful. It was the
Depending
best.
who's talking.
Brother Ali Mahdi, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure,
The
without
U.S.
a doubt.
African Leaders Summit, which happened in December. I think it was December 13th to the 15th,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead,
before we get
Brother
to
Ali
that,
Mahdi.
while our guest was speaking, so I looked up the budget of the BBC,
Oh.
and for 2021-22, it was 3.8 billion pounds.
Of
That was
British
not
people's
$1.
tax pounds, I should say.
With a B. So now you have them all, as they like saying here, you have them all shook up, you know, with your operation. You're causing a headache for people
For them
who
to raise the money. Yeah.
pounds budget. But also another thing that I was scribbling some notes as the brother was speaking, as Omar was speaking about the whole cultural thing. And I remember one of my students, I think, was asking people what languages they speak. And this young lady got up, you know, this is my student at John Jay College, said, I speak English, I speak French, and I also speak my dialect, Igbo. So I said, why is yours a dialect and not a language?
Oh.
And then she just stood there. She didn't know how to respond, but she started thinking about it. And she said, you know, you're right. I don't see why it's not a language. You see, but it's so deep-seated, the way that we are brought up to believe that you cannot own a language.
Colonized mindset, right?
You see, a language can be French, you know, English, Russian,
Igbo,
Chinese,
Tue.
Chinese. When you
Kiswahili,
say Igbo, no, we have to classify that.
Kikamba.
Yes.
What is that?
And also, when you mentioned Ronaldo, it's actually interesting you said that because remember Erdogan was in the news recently, the Turkish leader, because he claimed that Ronaldo was brought in as a sub because they wanted to, you know, disrespect him because of his views on Palestine.
Yeah.
He said Ronaldo in the past has come out supporting the rights of Palestine. So that's why, you know,
They went after him. Yeah.
He put him on the bench and brought him on the sub.
Speaking truth will have you branded as a disruptor, as a troublemaker.
And these days it's extremely dangerous.
Exactly, right. And we've seen also in the past with our African leaders, as we continue to speak about Africa,
I
a
mean,
lot of them have lost their lives because they were brave enough to speak truth and stand for their people. So I will ask
about the U.S. Africa Summit. And
yes, go ahead. Thank
the
you.
whole thing, of course, is upside down to the notion that these African leaders are summoned, you know, to
come over.
you know, to the big Bwana, you know, the big European Bwana, you know, so Bwana is like a Swahili word for the big boss, right?
Yes.
To discuss U.S. Africa Summit. And the administration was marketing it as a partnership. And then I was saying, you know, how do you have, you know, an economic elephant partnering with all these little, you know, economic mice? The thing is, if all the mice came together, they would also become, they would become the, not just a economic elephant. They would become the, because they have the resources that have enabled the United States, Britain, Western Europe, Japan, and now China industrialize. You see? Why should the people that actually have the wealth be coming to beg? It should be the other way around. So the whole concept, you know, I find this notion really comical. But because you have the proper type of leaders on the continent, they are not able to turn the game around, which is essentially what they should do. So we should keep on our conversation promoting the rise of leaders that will do the right thing with the political opportunity. What the U.S. is trying to do is to counter China, because China has been having China Africa summits, and then this is where they discuss those loans that they put into many of the African countries. So the challenge is, how are we going to really impress it, not so much on the leaders, upon our people really, that it is their duty to do whatever they need to do to make sure we have the right political leadership, because that's where it really begins. Give us a Thomas Sankara, give us a 54 Thomas Sankara, we would not be running to Washington. It would be the other way around. Joe Biden would be coming there and saying, okay, I need your resources. Instead of saying, come here so I can tell you that I want your resources and I want you to give it at the price that I want it for. So maybe, Brother Omare, you can tell us, your own take on the summit and what you've heard in conversations in Kenya and other parts of the continent, because of course your show is not only Kenyan, but it's Pan-African and Pan-Global, in fact. So give us your take on this loudly heralded U.S.-Africa summit.
Definitely. So for me, I'll still focus on the media. So during the build-up of this summit, like you say, based on what we do, we usually go through a lot of news, like daily. We just skim the news, see what's going on in Africa. So during the build-up to this U.S.-Africa summit, we noticed something weird. All the negative articles and stories on African leaders and presidents, like the Museveni dictator, the Kagame is causing problems in DRC, stories like that. All of them suddenly disappeared for that whole week, right? Building up towards the summit. So and then it goes to show you. So before on our channel, we used to call it Western media, right? Then we used to call it mainstream media. But recently, there's this term that I love so much, and it's called corporate media, right?
That is it.
The CNNs, the BBCs, like all those Al Jazeera's. I think journalism is dead, and media these days is just another name for capitalism. Media is business, right? Where everything has a catch, right? It's just not journalism. The journalists who exist in this world are the Julian Assange. Like if you're in trouble or you're sanctioned by the West, or you are cancelled, or you're you're in trouble, like you're actually a journalist, right? But if you're in the public eye, mainstream, the famous journalists you see, those ones are just like corporate employees over
mouthpieces.
Like marketers, right? They just market these things they've been told. It's like a good example for Africa US summit. It's like, okay, we need a positive image for Africa during this week, right? So do articles on projects the US has
started,
sponsored. Do the story that France cancelled this debt for this francophone country. Do this. So we started noticing that. So and the thing that's worrying, it's all coordinated, right?
Always.
You'd think the people for BBC and the CNN, they don't communicate, right? So there's something recently, like I just found out by luck, right? I think I think in the top 5, one of the top 5 richest families in this world, it's who? Like it's I don't know the name, but they're the family behind Reuters, right? Reuters.
Right. Yeah. The first the first media news agency in the world.
Yeah. That's that family is the top 5 of the richest family in the world. Like you can imagine how many billions they have, right? So my question is, how do you get rich selling this information, right? It's because it's a business. They work hand in hand with their governments. And this one, I'll mention this one because last year, like the whole of last year, we struggled so much fighting misinformation on the Ethiopia conflict that was happening, right? Where all these media organizations were just spewing hate, promoting more. They really wanted Ethiopia to crumble. Like they did all their best. If you see the negative articles and false articles, like just sometimes even things like CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, they were just making things up, right? No facts at all. Ethiopia fought back by removing all the journalists, all these journalists from Ethiopia, canceling their credentials, right? But still, the number of articles, negative articles that came out from Ethiopia based on that, and the story is that the TPLF were in control of Ethiopia for the last 30 years. They made a lot of friends in the media over the last 30 years. This new government just came by in from 2016, right? So this other group, the old administration, had friends in the Democratic Party. They had friends in the media, and they they had stolen tens of billions from the Ethiopian people. And hide it in countries like Switzerland and the places where you hide money. So during this conflict, they used all that, right, and poured it on the media. And the amount of support these guys got from the media, from this corporate media, is actually insane. Where it goes to show, like I know it's expensive to run an organization like CNN, right? Things like YouTube have taken and TikTok have taken a huge chunk of the advertising revenue that the BBC was generating, right? How many people these days advertise on BBC? Would you rather advertise on Google, Facebook, the other thing? So I think these new media organizations are pivoting and they're finding another way to make money. So I don't want to accuse people that of making of things I cannot prove, but
anything is possible.
Yeah, like it's my opinion or my suspicion that these days, if you want to push something in CNN, to push an idea, or like on BBC, to push something, an agenda on Al Jazeera, all you need is not the story, right? All you need is the money, and you can get what you want, right? Yeah. So for me, that's
a couple of points you made about the coordinated, the way they work, which defeats the whole purpose of media.
Yeah, definitely.
Your media, your news. How can it be that you all have the same stories, the same opinion, the same view? And the best example, of course, was the NATO war on Libya. And I discussed that, by the way, in my book, Manufacturing Hate. They were all on the same page.
Yep.
And that page was the same agenda, regime change. Not a single one took a different position, whether it was BBC, whether it was CNN, New York Times,
Radio France International,
Washington Post, all on the same page. I remember one interview with it was a BBC quote unquote reporter, and I put in quotes because listen to what I'm going to say. He was interviewing the late Senator McCain. This is before NATO had gone into Libya. When things were building up, you can tell by the coverage and the statements coming from the White House. So, Senator, when are we going in? When are we going into Libya? I said, wait a minute. You're supposed to be a reporter, a so-called reporter. You just say, when are we going in? That to me just summarized the whole thing. And then number two, the way they colluded. During the Libya war, they were ethnically targeting Libyans that look like us, right? For killing, ethnic cleansing. They went to the city of Tawaga, which was populated exclusively by people that look like us. They ethnically cleansed that city of a population of 50,000. Who knows how many were killed, how many were driven out into exile. And they would write on the buildings that they burnt down, on the walls. This was done by the brigade to purge slaves on the wall. And they were ignoring this story. None of this was written except by a Wall Street Journal. I give them credit for that. Wall Street Journal, you would not identify that they would be the ones to
especially
They wrote about it consistently. We wrote about it, of course, and we paid the price for it. I discussed in the book. They hijacked our website for 3 days. They kept saying it was a technical problem. When we got the website back, our editorial urging people to call the State Department, the White House, the Urban League, and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, to complain, that editorial had been deleted, and to call the New York Times to why are they not recovering this, and we put the phone number. So I'm glad you are hitting on that in terms of their, collusion.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. The best way to describe them is corporate media pushing a corporate agenda, but really not news. That is why you really add tremendous value. I think it's outlets such as yours that is actually going to actually deserve the term mainstream, you see, because you're going to be providing news instead of a corporate agenda. If you would like to expand a little bit on that, if Sister Nduku allows us to go over time a little. And then
yes, we can go a bit. Listen.
I was going to add a question. I was also going to add something to what Brother Milton had just said, but please, Brother Michael, go ahead.
Yeah. So as you all know, we just started 2naCheki with what we had, and over time it's grown into something big, and we have more plans to expand, more plans to make more sure to go full time, to become a 24-hour news like a news opinion channel, news stream, news channel. There's some few American kind of like channels and organizations and production companies that are doing what you're doing, and we really look up to them. So like you guys might know, there's a huge YouTube channel called TYT, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Young Turks.
Mm-hmm.
So the Young Turks is this liberal, libertarian channel that started just as they started as us, but these days they are a 24-hour grassroots news channel where these days they get even invited to the White House. There's this correspondence for the White House
dinner. Yeah, correspondence.
No, not White House dinners. When there's this press secretary who makes daily
weekly press briefing.
They've been taken. They've been
accreditation.
Accredited, right? So our goal is to eventually reach there, right, where we maintain our independence, right? Because I think TYT is like still sponsored by like the grassroots. They're not corporately owned. Like I think they survive through donations and the money they make on their own, right? Like once you're bought with like on like once you like this is also the thing why it's taken us so long to make the step, right? Because we've had so many offers of some
takeover
foreign company, like a European companies, like
they're coming for you.
Like
you're doing a very wonderful job.
You're doing a very wonderful job.
We'd like to support you.
Yeah, definitely. We've gotten so many offers. You'd be surprised. Like we love the branding. If you could just give us your reach and your people, and so we can, now that's now when the problem starts. Yeah. So
they give you 49%, and they want 51%.
Definitely. So it will be for me. There'll be no point of doing what I'm doing if I just end up being what you're fighting, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like you can be offered millions of dollars to be a small CNN or a small BBC, but like, what's the point? Because I don't think I started 2naCheki to make money. I just started 2naCheki because I was just so pissed in yeah. And
do you want to talk a bit, Omari? Sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to talk a bit about that start? What inspired you? What was going on at that time when you said enough is enough? I need to start something.
Yeah, definitely. So like I used to do research and communications at the UN, and every time there's an assignment or there's a task, every research I'm doing, I'm just saying, like, what's going on in Africa? Like I'm in Kenya and I'm looking around and I'm not seeing what I'm seeing online. I'm like, what? Do I live in a separate dimension where
Mm-hmm.
these guys are just like seeing things I'm not seeing, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't live in a perfect country, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's poverty, there's crime, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
was like, what? I think there are more gunshots a day in America than there is in the whole
In
of
just
Kenya for
one
the whole year.
city, in just one
Like
city in
for the
America.
whole year. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, why are they reporting there was this gun shooting in Kenya? Well, in the US, I think it's every other weekend, right? I think, yeah,
Every
where there's
day.
just where it's just a massacre, right? Like every day, I think it's for like there's small stories, but I think every other week, like it's a massacre, like it's a group of
Mm-hmm.
people being shot. So it's like this, like something has to be wrong. It's just not me. So I
That's
started
true.
seeing, and then it was just not things on crime. It
There's
was
so much
social
lessons
things.
coming out from the brother right now.
Yeah,
Please
exactly.
continue.
Then also then like like not every story that these news organizations report are negative. So now I'm like, okay, at least some good some good stories, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then the stories that actually meant to be positive are condescending stories, right? Like a good example is like even recently, I think on BBC where they were doing this story, right? The whole BBC where I think there's a condom shortage somewhere in Kenya. So they were like, oh,
Yeah, I've
prostitutes
seen that.
recycling condoms
Mm-hmm.
to,
Mm-hmm.
so stories like that. Or there's this kid who made a helicopter with a wire, like using wires. Or there's this mechanic who restored, like I say, they're very condescending stories where they're not made for development or encouragement. They're all made for like, oh look,
To
they
poke
can also
fun at them,
do,
yeah.
Upgrading.
they can also do things. Look, so cute, like so, like like kind of those condescending stories are filled in BBC, are filled in CNN, Al Jazeera, right? Like I challenge anybody watching, right, to go to CNN and actually find actually a story that's meant to inspire or develop somebody in Africa. They're extremely few, right? The ones
Mm-hmm.
they are condescending. So we're like, okay, the good things they cover are condescending, made to make white people feel good about themselves. Or like, oh, my donations actually helping. Our taxpayers' money that donates money to Africa is actually helping. Stories like that. Like, oh, there's a borehole that USAID built. Stories like that, right? Yeah, more
God doesn't
PR.
any
Yeah,
water, right?
yeah, more PR. But uh, so those are what we were there, and I googled Africa on Google Africa. I went
Mm-hmm.
to news. The
Ah.
first 10 stories on the first page negative, second page negative, third page until the 10th page negative. I also did the same on YouTube Africa, YouTube, like just like bad news, right? So I was
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, like what, I have a goal that uh, I just want, when you Google Africa, whatever you get is the truth, right? Like for me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm.
what's this? Like one of those romantics who think like
Right.
Africa is perfect,
Yeah,
Mm.
or
yeah,
we
yeah,
we
yeah,
live
yeah.
in
Right.
a
And
perfect world.
that's
No, no,
what
no,
you're
no.
asking for. But you
Yeah,
want
yeah,
some balance. You want a wholesome presentation.
Exactly.
definitely. Just like for me, my goal was I just wanted the truth, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
in Africa there's the good and the bad, but the world was
Just like
just
the.
seeing, yeah, the world was just seeing the bad and they made up one, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal was just to cover Africa equally, fairly from an African perspective. And now this day, like I think it happened like 2 years ago, where I googled Africa on the first, like on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
the first 10 pages. I think 5 were positive African stories, and not and this is the good thing, not from BBC, not from Al Jazeera, from other channels. Where, like, I'm sure you guys have heard of Wodemaya, right?
Yep, yep,
There's
Yes,
yep,
this
yep.
yes, yes,
Ghanaian
yes, yes.
YouTuber.
Our Ghanaian friend.
There's a Wodemaya story.
Mm-hmm.
This this African American came to Ghana, started
Mm-hmm.
a $1 million chicken company.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Positive stories like that. Another one is this Burna Boy outsells, like I think Wembley or something, right? Like another story. But the guys, as I said, the corporate media, they were all kicked out, and they're all in the
second page.
and
Monopoly.
definitely. And for me, I think that's the goal of what you're doing. Like I wouldn't even be upset if there's an African who's covering corruption in Africa, and they're all doing negative stories on Africa. Well, this politician is corrupt. They're doing this, and something like Nigeria needs to change. I love channels like that because he's a Nigerian, he's experiencing that corruption, he wants change from that corruption, and he's using his voice to try to find a solution for that corruption. I love negative stories like that on Africans. But if there's this white person, and I'll also tell you another story that like also now made me now like quit the UN and just do my thing, right? So there's this time where the United Nations, like we had a kind of a media workshop, right, where they invited editors from all over the world to come to talk to these people, us in the communication in the communication department, and kind of like tell us the experience, like learn from the best, right? So there was this old BBC guy, like I think he's a very famous person. It's just that I don't know his name, but he's he's as famous as Sir David Attenborough, right? He's been in the BBC since. Yeah. So he came. He said, like he started the BBC. Like he started as a young kid. He's seen the world. Yeah,
David Dimbobi.
I forgot the name, but like I'll try to maybe remember.
Okay.
But so he, like he's telling us his story, right? So for me, I always respect experience and knowledge, right? Experience beats everything, right? So then there was this other kid, like I think it was my age. He was the new chief editor for Africa from the New York Times, right? Like a white, like pale white.
Milton's friend.
You can tell it was his first time in Africa based on the sunburn. You can always tell how a white person is in Africa, right? Because white people who live in Africa, they've got a different kind of tan. It's more bronze, right?
Yeah.
But a white person who's visiting Africa as a tourist, it's burnt, it's red, right? So you can always tell how long a white person has been living in here. So there's this guy, he's definitely sunburnt, right? So he's probably in his early 30s. Yeah. So he's sitting us telling us how Africa is, and in my mind I'm like, what does this guy know about Africa, being Africa, what's going on in Africa, right? And then in his CV, he's so proud. I went to Princeton University, and I learned from the best of the best. I'm like
his
what?
credentials.
Like I'm saying, like what relevance is that to somebody in a village who's living his life in
zero, none.
Like what is Princeton? Like Princeton, they take that degree and use it to light fire for the firewood, right? It's more useful for that. So that's when I was like, what is going on here? The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, they think they can come and keep doing what they've always been doing, like write our stories, tell our stories, choose our path, what Africans should be caring about, right? Now it's LGBT rights, so every African should concern themselves with LGBT rights, right? It's like it's what else? Israel. Africa, don't look at Israel. It's nobody talks about Israel.
No, you don't.
Media. Yeah, you don't talk about Israel. Africa.
You will be labeled anti-Semitic very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Today, Africa, it's corruption. Tomorrow, it's what else?
War,
hunger, war, drought. Right. So I was like, oh man, I'm really tired of being steered by these people who don't know Africa. They've never been to Africa. They have no idea what it's like to be an African. Someone like that is one who's approving stories on Africa, right? And Amadi, I'm sure I'm sure you as a journalist, and I'm sure you've worked in these organizations, right? The type of editors, chief editors you've had, right? Somebody who's like
You've had
saying,
a special encounter with them. Let's just say that for now.
he's still licking his wounds.
A very
we will
intimate
have occasion-
relationship there.
We will have occasion to explore that topic in depth, without a doubt.
Definitely. So you can imagine these are the people who are approving stories, who are directing what's supposed to be told about Africa. Somebody who's in his seat in New York, he's never left
In his
even
air-conditioned room,
air-conditioned room, has a good salary,
drinking coffee.
drinking coffee, as in some, like, what do these people know about Africa? Like, they've got zero experience, zero knowledge. At least for the BBC guy, I would respect him because like he's been in Congo. Yeah, he's been around, and that's with age, right? That's with experience, right? Yeah. So him, if he tells me a few things about journalism, I'll take what I need to take. Leave what I see is not relevant, right? But a guy who, like, we're age mates, just because he went to Princeton University, I should let him tell me about how African am I, or what I should care about. So things like that really piss me off. And
that's the saddest part, because it shows you what he doesn't even know. I mean, when you're so ignorant that you don't know you're ignorant, that's the problem.
It's the worst kind.
Yeah, but talking about sitting here in New York, I'll just give you one example. Sitting here in New York and deciding what is Africa. In the research for my book, Manufacturing Hate, I found a letter written by a New York Times correspondent from Nigeria after he opened the paper and read his own story. You know, he was covering the civil war in Nigeria. Then he sent another letter to his editor in New York. He said, "Who inserted that description of Nigerians dressed in grass leaf skirts in my article?" I never saw that. I never wrote it. So who would put it in there? But going to your point, an editor sitting here in New York, because remember, this is 1966, saying, wait a minute, my reporter wrote a story about Nigeria and without putting Nigerians dressed in the African attire, which is grass leaves. No. He must have seen it. So let me put it on his behalf in the article. Can you imagine? You know, and then there are many variations of that example, but you hit it right on the target.
Yes, please. Can we've taken 15 minutes from the audience, but
quickly
yes, Adesoji, you had said, you know what, actually, Adesoji, I'll let you can make your comment and ask your question, and then you can take that question. I will highlight it from Laura Sullivan. She made a comment before, but go ahead, Adesoji.
Okay. So question to not just to add to what Brother Omare has been saying is you said sometimes we have ideas of what is happening, but we don't want to confirm it. Typical example is what happened to Patrice Lumumba. Exactly. People suspected, but they didn't quite know the extent to which it was. A friend of this show actually wrote a book, which the sister is putting up there, White Malice. Susan Williams.
Yes.
It's an in-depth understanding of how media, corporate establishments come together to, go into Africa and decide this is what, the worst part is that there was not a moment that Lumumba said anything against anti-West. But they didn't just like the idea of who he is. Yeah. And
he was a black man who did not know his place.
Just going back to what you said about the Princeton guy.
In Parliament that no, colonialism was actually wrong. You did not come to civilize us. That's signed death certificate. By the way, that book is almost 600 pages.
Yeah.
Yes.
You will not put it down. That's what I'm telling you.
I haven't.
It's book that I could not put down.
and even like as you mentioned it, we covered that book on our new show. It's called Africa Secret Files, where we talked on like some of this CIA involvement in like in Africa, where before it used to be like conspiracy theories, but based on the things that were like actual evidence, it proves that these things, and they classified files. It proves that the CIA had a hand in killing Patrice Lumumba, right?
Yes.
The CIA had a hand in the coup in Ghana. The CIA did this. The CIA supported the apartheid government. Things like that, and that's the things that they've revealed. So for me, I always think, what are the things that are still
unrevealed?
Yeah, speaking of things that are unrevealed.
Truth.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of things that are unrevealed. Okay, UK in 2016 donated as part of its Department of Foreign Development, gave to African countries 25 million. As you know, that is what they will put into the press. This is how magnanimous. In the same year, 40 British companies quoted on the London Stock Exchange took out of Africa a combined whopping 197 billion watts of resources. If you put that into context, at that time, Kenya had an external debt of 39 billion. Nigeria had 45 billion. Ghana had
talk about that debt.
27 billion. So add that together, and you think Africa should still be indebted to these countries?
Yeah, Michael, please talk about that. The debt, apparently, the international debt that Africa owes the West.
Yeah, so for our channel, every year we always have a theme that we always pursue. So I think in 2000 we really pursued the illicit financial flows, right? Where the United States, the USAID, gives Africa maybe $300 million in aid and in support, things like medicine for AIDS ARVs, but takes out something like $10 billion, right? So there's this famous chart where it shows how much Africa gets in aid, in business, right? So the combined aid, all the investments we get, and all the amount of money that is taken out from Africa through illicit financial flows, right? So this means, right, because it's even worse because Africa is being drained in two ways, right? So there's the official way where it's let's say a British company. Example like Google and YouTube, right? They pay almost zero taxes for operating in Africa because they are based in Ireland, right? And Ireland is like a tax, kind of like a tax haven, yeah, right? So you can imagine how much money Google makes from Africa, right? And how much taxes they pay to these African governments, right? So those are called illicit financial flows because these operations, like all the mining operations, they find loopholes so that they don't pay the amount of taxes. Like a good example, even this year, Burkina Faso, I think, has taken back all the mines, has nationalized all the mines to stop this from happening.
Yeah.
Because there's this story where Burkina Faso there's this Canadian company, I forgot the name. It was getting, I think, $5 billion dollars from Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso was only getting I think 2% of that.
Yeah, it's probably Barrick Mines. That's one of the largest Canadian.
Which is probably one of the reasons why they weren't invited to the summit. But go on, Brother Omare. Sorry.
Definitely. Also, Zimbabwe has decided that it will also stop its diamond, cobalt, lithium deposits from going out. Tanzania was on the forefront of doing that. It had it was almost Tanzania is like the third. People this is something that people don't know. People always talk about DR Congo, how DR Congo has everything, right? So the second one is South Africa. South Africa has the most. Then the third one is Tanzania. Tanzania has the diamonds, has the cobalt. It has so much, right? Together with the Tanzanite. So Tanzania was going the same route, but we all know Magufuli died last year, and the new president is just undoing
everything.
Towing the line.
Yeah. She's returning to the status quo. Magufuli was really, as I said, there are these leaders who try their best to do the right things, right? He was redrawing contracts. He was saying, you guys actually need to pay these taxes, right? He cancelled, I think there's this, Like I usually don't know this many companies. It's usually not in my field. There's this one in a big one in Tanzania. It's not Glencore, like I think a Canadian one or an Australian one, a huge one. Yeah,
Is Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto
yeah,
is
yeah,
the
yeah. Rio Tinto.
Rio Tinto, yeah.
Rio Tinto. I think was taking so much money from Tanzania. Then he kind of like first of all he stopped all operations. He was like, business is closed. If you want it open, bring your investors. Let's renegotiate, right? So they complained. They went to the US, complained. They eventually renegotiated, right? So my question is, what if all African leaders were that stubborn and that like that much of a risk taker? Yeah.
And it's not necessarily being stubborn. It's standing up for your people and for your country.
Definitely.
It's being a leader.
Let's be honest too. We have to mention this point. That it's no accident that the late Magufuli is no longer with us. So sometimes these other leaders see these things and
he focuses their mind.
Correlation, and they say, you know what, maybe they're telling us that he passed away from such and such a thing, but then who knows,
Yeah, definitely.
Allegedly, Brother Alimadi, allegedly.
I mean, but
allegedly.
okay, allegedly, but Sankara said it.
No, Sankara,
Sankara said, if I refuse to pay if we all refuse to pay the debt, we'll be here laughing and cheering next year.
Yeah, but
if only me does.
To the importance of having a collective position.
Yeah. I want to go quickly because we didn't get a chance to include and engage the audience, brothers. If you let me. I'm just going to highlight that Laura Sullivan had mentioned that as we were talking. We have the IMF and the World Bank. Those are big, huge culprits in Africa. I'll let any of you, whoever wants to jump in and talk about the IMF and the World Bank.
No. I want to agree with her. I've been in front of the IMF and World Bank headquarters over the last 2 years, at least 8 times, for protests organized by Ugandan diaspora. I agree with what Walter Rodney said, that the biggest enemies of Africa, they're not meant to develop Africa. Of course they can. Because first of all, some of the conditionalities of the loans are that you are not allowed to industrialize. And everybody knows you cannot develop without
industrialization
and trade in manufactured goods.
And
if anybody wants any evidence that World Bank, IMF are not there to develop Africa, point one single country where they have a success story. That should make you suspicious. What kind of bank, succeeds in making failures, and it's not, and it's still in business.
Stays in business, exactly.
With that,
even
the continent, since they started lending to Ghana to build the dam at Akosombo, right? And that was a good project, I have to say. But Nkrumah also paid the price for that. But you show me a single success story where Africa has become a developed economy by working to the World Bank and IMF. That should address your answer right there. But if you want, anybody can read more about them from Walter Rodney's writings, and he has a few lectures on YouTube as well. So that's my.
And what specific book? Because I know there is one specific book. I have read it as well.
Okay,
that
for
speaks
Rodney,
mostly on
read of course how Europe underdeveloped Africa, but also if you go to YouTube, search for Crisis in the Periphery, Africa and the Caribbean. Look for that lecture as well.
You speak of the Caribbean, and just as I'm thinking, and I love having solutions to problems. That's a great pastime for me. I'm always trying to figure out how we can fix things. I would love to see Africa and the Caribbean have a summit. I've heard some rumors that it's going to be happening, but I am looking forward to that.
I think it happened.
Already one.
There was one that happened last year. It's called CARICOM, but now that one was the initial one. But I think there'll be one next. I think this year. Yeah,
there's a big one coming up. Yes, I'm looking forward to that one. I'm going to highlight another question, Brother Omare. You can take this one. This is Kelly in the chat. She says, "Is there a way to have fair trade with Western countries, and how does that trickle down to benefit the people too? You being there, how is this partnership, especially from the summit?" And I know they've been working with some of the organizations that were there at the summit before the summit.
Well,
are you feeling the benefits that are coming to Kenya? Brother
No.
Omare?
So for me, like this one here, it's a really good question because we have an answer, right? So when Kagame was the chairman of the African Union, he achieved one thing, and he really tried. He used all his favors, he used all his, all his influence he's built over the years, right? So what he did was he established the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and made, I think, 52 African countries ratify it, right? So that trade agreement alone makes it the largest trade agreement in the world. It makes it bigger than the World Trade Organization. It makes it bigger than, like in the number of countries signed and in the number of volumes of goods traded, right? So Africa trades more with Europe and America than it trades with itself.
Yeah.
So with the power of the Africa Continental Free Trade, it's established to make Africa trade with itself, and we will not even need fair trade with the West. Kenya can be like, hey, Kenya can be like, hey, you UK with your fancy demands of our avocados. They keep rejecting Kenyan avocados for little blemishes or what. Like you know what? Hey, Uganda wants these avocados. South Africa wants these avocados.
Exactly.
Egypt can be like, hey, you America with your like Egypt is really good in making things like industrial things, right? Hey, we can send all these things to South Africa. We can send all things to West Africa. So when Africa starts to trade with itself seriously, right? Things like the COMESA, things like the East African Community, things like ECOWAS. If this region start doing internal trade, Africa alone has all the resources it needs, right? A good example is Africa uses billions of dollars every year to get wheat from Ukraine and Russia,
Irony.
right? Every year, right?
And I've seen some wheat farms in Kenya. I've driven by them. So yeah,
definitely. So last year, guess what? Abiy, Ethiopia's president, said, "Guess what? You know what, Africa? You don't need wheat from Ukraine. You don't need wheat from Russia. Ethiopia has just become the largest wheat producer in Africa, and we've got so much for our own people, and also to start trading with Kenya. Kenya already is interested in Ethiopian wheat, Uganda, and I think like Somalia, right? So my question is, what if there are like 10 Ethiopias around Africa? Will we ever need Ukraine's or Russia's wheat? No, we'll be like, hey, screw you guys with your war. Like, go deal with their stuff.
Sort yourselves out.
We don't need to be involved with the war. You can continue fighting for 100 years, 10 years. Us, we are okay with our wheat. If Africa has the courage and the ability to do that, I think we will start controlling our own fate. But right now, Russia can tell Africa, hey, you guys support us or else no wheat. Ukraine can tell Africa, support us or no wheat. So Africans are just like what's this world?
It's a marionette. They're controlling us with the strings, right?
Is like chickens with no heads, just running. Yeah. So my answer to that is that Africa needs to exclusively start trading with itself because we've got everything we'd ever need from inside us, right? So
yeah. Thank you so much, brother.
It is 17% within Africa. Europeans trading amongst themselves, it's 80% plus. Ours is 50%.
Say that one more time, louder, please, brother Alimadi.
17%. That's
within Africa.
Within Africa.
Oh, that's a shame.
And in Europe,
80+%.
Wow. So
from Africa.
No, just Europeans trading among themselves. So imagine if Africa had an 80%, because I'm sure we need like no man is an island. I'm sure there's some things we need from from other countries, right? But if 80% we had the basic things, oil, Nigeria can supply Africa 10 times over from oil. Just Nigeria alone. No, not Egypt, not Algeria, not just Nigeria alone can supply Africa's energy problems, right?
Yeah.
Like what else? For coltan, lithium, Zimbabwe can supply. Zimbabwe is I think the third largest producer of lithium in the world, right? Another country like DR Congo is the world's largest.
We can start our own phone manufacturing company, right? Compete with Apple. We can have phones made in Africa.
So we can trade 99% or within ourselves, the 1% we can get the what might we need from America.
I don't know what we need from America, but yeah. I'm just... Anyway, this conversation is great. We can talk all day,
We
but
will
as
have
we
a part
know, we
two for
have
sure.
lives to
We will
live,
definitely
right,
have
and
a part
places
two
to
with our
be.
inaugural guest.
Sorry, Brother Alimadi, say that one more time.
No, I said we'll definitely have a part two with our inaugural guest.
Yes, definitely. More sessions with you, Brother Omari. And thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank, we had one more question. We're not going to, it was addressed, I will say. One of the audience members, Kiss of Love 14, had asked whether there were other African summits. And yes, as you mentioned, there was the Caribbean one last year, and there's one coming up, the same summit with the Caribbean. I want to see flights directly from the Caribbean to Africa, from Africa to the Caribbean. We don't have to go to Europe to catch a flight to the Caribbean. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to extend a bit. If brothers, you want to say anything to our audience as we say farewell, Kwaherini.
Karibu, and for now, we hope to see you again the same time next week on Sunday.
And for me, I would like to urge all 2naCheki viewers, all 2naCheki followers to please follow Kumbukeni. Their URL will be on the link. Please subscribe to them, show them support. That's how we grow. We support each other, like the way you support us. We really appreciate you guys. Please make sure, and I'll go check. Like I usually, I'll go check for how many
You're gonna take
followers are following you. I'll take a roll call, and then
thank you so much for the support,
conversation.
2naCheki. Thank you so
that,
much. And likewise, go ahead, brother.
On that unity note, that is what African unity is all about.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Exactly.
And I want to reveal actually a secret. Listeners, you should feel even much more appreciative because, to be honest, our brother Adesoji was not feeling that well. But he said, for this inaugural, I'm going to make sure, I soldier on and be there. So let's give the brother a round.
And feel better, Adesoji. Feel better sending you here.
Thank you.
Yes, so you can support us by joining as a Patreon at patreon.com/Kumbukeni, or by subscribing to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@Kumbukeni1. And like we say in Kiswahili, asanteni sana kwa kuungana nasi, and tunatumaini tutaonana nanyi wiki ijayo. Asanteni.